Okay, so let's go over some navigation in the 3D model viewer. It's kind of like the Maya navigation where you're using Alt and various mouse clicks to move around. So holding down Alt and left click will rotate around your model, Alt right click will zoom in and out, and Alt middle click will pan. If you hold down Shift and right click, you can rotate the light around, which is very, very useful seeing specular highlights or just getting a better view of your model. Okay, so now that we know a little bit about 3D and navigation here, let's make this viewer a little bit smaller. Just click on this bottom bar and move it to be smaller. Usually I just put this on my second screen, but for the recording, just have it here. Alright, should work. So you can still see my layers palette. Alright, so back to this panel over here where we're doing most of our adjustments. First and simplest one is this middle kind of page icon. Same thing like any layer. It's just adding a new layer. And with this layer, there's a couple of things. This first icon here is your visibility. If I turn this off and on, it turns the layer off and on. It doesn't look like much difference because I just have a gray texture here, so it's not doing anything special. This next one is where you can load a material, and there's a material library if I click on that. Next icon is edit the Dyna Mask. This is your mask. And the final one is the color that it's using. So I can change this to be like a dark blue, we'll say. And it updates here. And you can see in my 3D viewer, it's all a blue color. So let's add a Dyna Mask second off. This is really editing your mask right here. Remember, if you watched the previous video, I went over masking and how that is primarily what DDO works with. And that's what I'm going to be using right now. So it's going to give me a little box here saying would I want to paint in full shaded mode, or if I choose no, in quick editing mode. Quick editing mode is just basically a black and white image, so it works a little bit faster, but you don't get to see the full result. I'm going to click yes so I can still see what I'm doing full color. And that brings up my Dyna Mask editor. It will probably look something like this. You have a bunch of different options in here as your defaults to kind of get started and see what that gets us. So it's using the normal map and all of that cavities to kind of get an idea of where the color should lie. Which, if I was going to have this, it would make more sense to be the opposite of what it's currently doing. So I'm actually going to click on this Invert Mask icon. And that is the equivalent of just hitting Control-I to invert my mask. Now it's white and black instead of black and white. And you can see the result is much more desirable here. So we'll come back to this later, but that is the basics. We'll accept this. So now you can kind of see some black and white edging on this dynamic mask. And the same thing in my layers palette, it just has that black and white. If I hold down Alt and click on it, I can see that mask pretty easily. So let's add a material to this by just clicking on the circle icon. And this brings up just the kind of default library here. And we can add any sorts of material, just a basic one-piece material. Let's see, we'll go with steel that is dirty. Okay, so that changed a couple of things because it has some default changes to it. So now I have this really dirty, grungy material, and might change my fill color to black, which, because that's what steel does, it is black, but if I wanted to be back at that purple, I can change my color and it will give a nice tint of that blue to my metal. More stylized version of it. So with this new texture I have built out with a material, a Dyna Mask, and a color, I can also change the scale of the texture. So if it was looking too big, I can move this up or down depending on how much the scale I want. So you can see it's tiling a lot more, it was actually pretty good before. I don't really like this result, so I'm going to set it back, but I wanted to show you that's how you would scale up. This is based on your textile density, so if you have the correct textile density, you won't need to change this much. Then there's the texture intensity, and if I scoot that down, you can see it's much lighter overall. And then there is the opacity, which is just straight changing the opacity slider instead of how intense the texture is. You can also enter any value you want, say you wanted it 80%, whatever. And then there are these two O buttons. This is your blending mode. So each one of your texture and the layer has a blending mode. So I could set this to multiply if I wanted to, and it will have a different effect. By the default, this one is a linear light. I could set this to any other setting I want. If you ever find that your 3Do is not showing the changes, you can click on this little force refresh button, and that's going to update. This is particularly useful when you make a change inside of Photoshop. So you added a decal, dropped it into Photoshop file, and it won't recognize it until you hit this force refresh button. Okay, so I just made a clean layer. Let's go on to something a little bit different. We're going to add a material, which is just the sphere right next to that. And this brings up that same library that it got when I clicked on this add material. It's the same thing, it's just a different way of getting this. Let's see, what do we want? Well, let's get some kind of fabric-y tape going on. This might look cool. We'll try it. And it's going to add that material right in here. And it looks pretty much the same. It has that black nylon, and if I look in my 3Do, you can see a little bit of that texture. Now, none of that texture is actually coming through in the albedo. It's really just in the normals and how it's catching the light. Well, obviously I don't want this to go over my entire gun. I want it to be isolated to this tape area. So I can do this a couple different ways, but I'm just going to do it the easiest way. I have my nylon selected here in the layers. I'm going to hold down C to bring up my color ID map, and then click on the green color. And that's going to apply a mask and just show it right here. And there we go. Now I have it just applied to this section. Very nice. I like that. And you can see here this little check box here now has a color filled it with the green, because that's the color in my color ID map that is being applied to. And I can of course change the scale and all of these other pieces right here. But let's add a smart material next. I'll click on that. And this looks pretty similar to the thing that we were just using, but it's a little bit different, and I'll go over that in just a second. Let's go to military and generic gunmetal. Sounds good. And apply that to everything. Now if I look over here in my panel, it looks a lot different than it did before. That's because a smart material is not just one layer in my layers palette. It is a folder of a whole bunch of these things. It just added together to make something more interesting and kind of create a base material to work from a lot faster. So we have our base steel, then they have paint, some light scratches, some lubrication. All of these together make this generic gun. So I'm going to go out with my navigation here. Is kind of your go in layers, go out of layers. There's little arrows to click in and out. You can click on the folder to enter the group, or you can just click the forward arrow. If you go really deep, it kind of has your breadcrumbs as well. You can just click on the all button to get back to the very end. Now that I'm in this base piece, let's add this to just be a specific area. So let's hold down C, and I actually want it to be on this black section. We'll click on that, and I have this whole folder selected, so it's going to apply that material to that black color ID. Only there. Alright, that looks nice. Now I actually want it to be applied also to this handle of the gun. So what I want to do to add another material ID to the same group here is first off hold down C in my 3D viewer here, and then hold down Control and click on the extra group that I want it to be assigned to. It will apply that color or that material to two different IDs. You can click on this little ID here, and now I see two check marks for where the material they're assigned to. Okay, so let's go on to the next piece. Let's add a color paint layer. Clicking on that, and with this layer, you'll notice it's pretty similar, but it has this toggled paint mode button on. And if I hover over here, nothing really changes, but if I hover over my 3Do, let's expand this out for the stem apart. So if I start painting or clicking and dragging, I can paint directly on my model. So let's go over a couple of painting abilities. It's, again, based on my sort of navigation and painting. So if I hold down B as in brush and right click, I can change the diameter of my brush. And if I hold down, well, I'm actually going to change my brush type here. You can go up to the very top, and it will have a bunch of different tips that is preloaded with Quixel. So I'll just go on this one here. B right click to make it larger, and then B left click will actually rotate your brush around. So you can get nice, okay, I want a little paint here, but now I need to change the direction. Over here, and paint up there, so on and so forth. And B right and left click will change the opacity of your brush. Or you can just go up here. All of these options are up on the top bar where you can change your opacity. Click on here, you can change the angle of your brush, the size of your brush, the spacing of your brush. All of the usual adjustments you can use are right here. You can turn on shape dynamic, transfer, all of these. And your eraser brush is right up here. Next is the color swatch, whatever color you want to be painting with, as well as your background color. This is the switch button. Let's see, Cemetry, that's a nice one that usually doesn't have, so let's put Cemetry on X, turn that on, and now I have a little plane showing me, but my model is not, it may be in the center, but it uses the object space, which it has a little offset, so it's not perfectly centered in this object. Then there's the Show Mask button. I don't have any mask on right now, but I could be using that. And the last one that is particularly important is the Performance. This allows you to have undos. By default, undos are off because it's performance-wise, it causes a lot of issues. So if you're seeing a lot of slowdown, you might want to keep it off. But in the performance drop down, you can turn on undos. I would keep this as low as you can. There's also auto fix seams that you can turn on, so every time you paint it fixes the seams. Or when you're ready, you can just hit this button, fix seams. Which what that does is when you're painting, you can see how at the UVs there's a little seam happening there. It's not really there. It will fix it when you stop painting, or you can just hit this fix seams and it will get rid of that unsightly seam. Alright, so I'm done showing this wonderful painting job I've got. And I will first minimize my little screen here, put it back where it was, and then click on toggle my paint mode. And this will, when you go out of paint mode, it's going to fix all of the seams for you and apply all of that to your texture. If I wanted to, I could still have a mask on this. I could just still apply a color ID, or I can just toggle back on and go into paint mode some more. It's all up to me, but I have some nice ability to actually paint on my model, which is extremely nice. And of course have my opacity slider here, so if I wanted that lower, or if I just want to set this to say screen, I'm actually going to hit the delete button on this layer because I don't need this. And I can also create a group or a folder just by clicking on that, but it's going to group whatever you have selected. So I just grouped another group. So if I click on here, now I have to go to in to get to this piece, and I have my breadcrumbs leading back out. So I don't really like this. I'm going to go back to this folder, right click over here, and group. There we go. Now I have that gone and I'm only one folder deep instead of two unnecessarily. Oh, and it actually got rid of my color ID map here, so I'm going to click on the red and hold down Control and click on this black. It's not the 000 black, because that is the actual the background where it doesn't actually apply to your model, and I don't want that. I may apply this metal to a couple more pieces as well. So hold down C and Control, we'll add it here, C and Control. Probably would have been better to make this material the base one and then add on top of that. It would have been much more effective time-wise, but not as effective to show you how to do all multiple materials to one group. And as a nitpicky thing, now this black does not stand out enough for me, so I'm going to go into my nylon tape area here and change the color. So up the hue, and maybe like a tan brown color. Perfect. Okay, so obviously this section here is supposed to be wood, but is metal, and it's very odd. So I want to change that. So instead of creating a smart material and then applying it to a certain ID group, I have a faster way to do this. Hold down C and Shift, and we'll click on that material ID, and that brings up my smart material. And I want wood texture. I'll go worn wood, I suppose, and hit maybe worn lacquered. Apply that, and check out the texture, which the wood is grain is going the wrong way on half of my object. I'm going to turn up my lights as well. Not what I want, although the top looks pretty good. So we'll adjust how this works. So the problem that is happening here is actually in my 2D texture. The wood is going to be always going left and right. But this section down here, let's do a little bit of paint so we know which is top and which is bottom. We'll add a little paint layer. Green is top, and blue is and we'll see on our 2D texture which side is up and which side is down. Okay, so the bottom texture here should be going vertical instead of horizontal, and then it will look correct. So what we need to do is duplicate this base color here, which is the texture that's actually going right and left. The rest of it is just damage and wear and scuff marks and such like that. So let's right click and duplicate layer. We'll call this one wood bottom. Right click again and rotate this clockwise 90 degrees. Doesn't matter if it's counterclockwise or clockwise, as long as it's going to go vertical. Much, much better. But now this one is going the wrong direction. So what we really need to do is have this wood be the top, and rename is just double clicking just like it is in Photoshop. We need to add a mask for this being just this section here and the top wood just being over here, so they're kind of working together to make one texture. So what I really want is that this one should go vertical and this one should go horizontal. So I need to edit the mask. You know, it'd be easiest to edit the mask right here in this 2D texture. However, if I edit this mask right in Photoshop, like I'll just do it real quick. Oh, look, I already have this part done, and then just invert this because I want it to be everything but this section. And then use a force refresh. It doesn't update over here. Even though this mask says it's like this, it doesn't do that over here. So that's problematic. I'm just going to undo that sort of thing. So what we really want to do is click on the Edit Dyna Mask, and we'll go into Quick Painting mode, which is just a black and white version, so it's a little bit faster to work with. And inside of here, we want to click on Paint a Mask in Photoshop. So I can use any tools in here, and I know it's about this section here, so I'll just paint that, hit Control. Well, actually I want to invert this mask. So click on the Invert button and accept this mask. And that's going to get the results and also update over here in my panel so it will recognize that it's changed. So now let's force this to refresh in our 3D view and take a look at this. Okay, look at it's going both the right direction. Wonderful. Yes. Perfect. So now I can delete this temporary layer that was telling me which way is up and which way is down. And that will be it for this video. I will see you in the next part of this series, going over a little bit more in depth what we're doing here.